Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. We have some key changes we want to talk about for late September. Given trends in the tropics, we have a potential tropical system. It should stay well out to sea in the Atlantic, and then what will actually be impacting the Pacific jet stream will be a westward moving typhoon. It's allowed for the data to trend warmer in the extended range. We'll take a look at this as we go throughout this video. Wanted to start out with just a general overview over the next couple of weeks, and certainly as expected, you can see much above normal temperatures across the West Coast, Canadian prairies, and the eastern ag belt into the Midwest over the next 7 days. Much above normal temperatures continuing. We do have a couple of storm systems and fronts that are going to lead to moisture across the central part of the country. We've been talking about this for the last week or two, that the plains would continue to be the spot that would see more moisture, less dry time, and probably a cold front in here as we go throughout this period. Now, it's not going to be a substantial cold front as things stand right now, and through the next 6-7 days, overall, the eastern ag belt, eastern part of the country, continuing to run drier than normal. We do have a weak subtropical disturbance off the east coast that will lead to some heavy rain in the short term in the mid-Atlantic, as it has this past weekend. Taking a look as we go into the week 2 time frame, this is really where the change comes into play, because if we take a look here, and we're going to look at this in more detail, we do have multiple cold fronts in the forecast here as we go into the week 2 time frame. However, they've trended weaker. They've trended less robust. There's not really a cold air source, and a big reason for that is because we are seeing a very strong Pacific jet flood the U.S. with mild air. It's kind of cutting off our source of cooler air up in Canada and the Arctic. You think back to these fronts that we've had so far early this season, we actually had a direct tap to the Arctic. Obviously, that air modified as it worked further to the south, but it allowed for it to be very notable. We don't have that this time around, and with the stronger trend in the jet, probably going to remain warmer than normal. We do have some fronts in there. We'll probably moderate at times. We'll see some more moisture, but I think when all is said and done, based off of the trend there, not going to be as cool with these fronts as we initially anticipated. So a warmer trend, a warmer roll forward here in this week 2 period. Now, start of week 2, end of week 1, there will be more moisture opportunities for the eastern ag belt. You can kind of see that here in the week 2 time frame, but trending drier down the road once again across parts of the Midwest, with more of the moisture into the Pacific Northwest. I do think data could turn a little bit drier in the far eastern ag belt and the mid-Atlantic. Taking a look at rainfall over the next 7 days in a little bit more detail. Again, guys, you can see it's the middle of the country with the heaviest rain, 1 to, in some spots, locally 2 inches plus of rain over the next 7 days. You can see it fizzles out the further east that you go. I would not be shocked into early next week if we saw some wetter trends in the eastern ag belt. And if we take a look, guys, at the 19th to the 25th or the 20th to the 26th of the month, in that time frame there, we do have increased probabilities of moisture. This is an area we've been talking about for quite some time, between the 20th and the 26th of the month, that would see a better window for rain opportunities. That is still very much on the table, though, again, expecting it to be brief. I don't necessarily expect this to be a wet pattern that settles in for an extended period of time for Missouri, Illinois, and into Indiana. Taking a look at the culprit behind warmer trends in the extended range. We have a strong westward moving typhoon that's expected to develop and push towards China and Taiwan over the next 7 days. That helps pump up the Pacific jet and the ridge over East Asia, and ultimately reorients the jet stream in a way that leads to warmer air in the U.S. If you think back to previous outlooks that we've done when you get more of a typhoon recurve, which you can see maybe some data trying to hint at something weak in 10 days' time, something to keep an eye on, but you can see the much stronger signal is for a westward moving system. That favors warmth. The recurves favor colder air. We're leaning more towards the warmer solution right now. In addition to that, even beyond the evolution of that typhoon, East Asia, which I think right now has done a better job than the North Pacific, would indicate a milder pattern trying to linger around into the start of October. So backing off the idea that there could be some cooler air for a time into early October. That was what we talked about last week. Missed the mark on that, and again, I think a lot of it has to do with that typhoon, and that's just the challenge, guys, this time of the year. Until we get within 7 days or so, we're not really going to have a good handle on tropical systems. That's just the way that they go, and sometimes that means that 2.5, 3, 4 weeks out, there can be forecast misses September into October because of the tropical activity. And so we never really expected this to be as notable, certainly, as what we dealt with late August into September, now looking even less so with milder air winning out. But again, I will note, it's not that the fronts aren't there. In fact, if we look at our AIFS ensemble, you can see as we work into early next week, there is a front, there is a storm system in there. There's just not really any cold air with it. And then there's another one as we work towards the 27th of the month or so. That one for the eastern part of the country, again, was in the forecast. There's just not any cooler air with it. You can actually see why. Look at the trough on the west coast that's flooding the U.S. with milder air and ultimately just not allowing these fronts to pack any sort of a punch. In terms of how things evolve down the road, looking at our tropical forcing, looking at our global wind state, there's not much of a real change coming. We are expecting La Nina-like conditions to persist in the atmosphere. That's a weaker than normal global wind all the way out through much of October right now. In fact, maybe much more negative than normal, down to minus 1.5 to minus 2 standard deviations. And traditionally, that favors warmth as we head into October. But there's another piece to that, of course. As we look at our tropical forcing, we've been kind of stuck in MJO phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 over the past several weeks. Another reason that I think that we're not seeing as much of a cooler air signal is we're kind of stuck in phase 1 right now. That's warmer than phase 2. Generally into October, though, it does look like we're going to be, once again, kind of stuck in this 1, 2, and 3 category in terms of the MJO. Well, what does that mean? Here's phase 1, overall a warmer look. Phase 2, we did talk about last week how phase 2 generally turns a little bit warmer into October. You can see that here. And then phase 3 also warmer. And so, guys, you can see those three when combined with our global winds tend to favor the warmer than normal conditions. And with late September, with that cooler air not really panning out, there's not much of a cooler signal in the extended range as things stand. But we also have the other background forcing. The Pacific Ocean, you look at that correlation, tends to favor warmer air. You look at our La Nina state, also tends to favor, warmer air, tends to favor warmer air across the central part and the northern part of the country. Multiple different background state pattern drivers favoring warmth into the month of October. If we kind of combine all of the signals, here were the years that I felt like matched up best into October. You can see warmer air winning out overall, and in terms of moisture, drier conditions continuing generally across the eastern part of the country. We also have support for this idea from the EPS Weekly. While it hasn't been perfect, it's done a little bit better with this warmer pattern that we're in right now, and it overall matches with those analogs pretty well. It also tends to favor the drier conditions. Now, I suspect it's probably a little bit too dry, but I think generally this corridor in here of dryness that it's seen, it's probably pretty well spot on, with maybe some moisture in the Great Lakes in the interior Northeast and parts of the Western Plains. Again, kind of a persistence pattern. That's where we've been expecting to see more of that ahead. If there is a time frame perhaps where we could get some cold fronts data trying to indicate more of a Western U.S. ridge tendency down the road into the second week of the month, to me, this still isn't a big cold signal, but, if there are going to be cold fronts, they're likely going to be east. It's probably going to be the east coast to the southeastern part of the country. Something we'll watch. This would still be a mild signal for much of the ag belt in the Midwest, all the way out through the end of the weeks 3 and 4 time frame. The other piece of this is just where we've been and where we're going. 2024 is a very close match. Here's a look at its forecast for the week 2 time, or what it was in the week 2 time frame. Here's a look at our forecast, the AIFS for the week 2 time frame. Overall, a lot of similarities in the upcoming pattern to what happened just last year. And if you look at how things rolled into the weeks 3 and 4 time frame, it stayed pretty mild to start out October last year. And we've got multiple different pattern drivers that would support that idea. And so with that in mind, I just don't have enough evidence to go against the mild idea and favoring much of the country really to average out warmer than normal in the weeks 3 and 4 time frame. Again, if there are cold fronts, I think they likely dive into the eastern part of the country. We left some room, more normal conditions in the southeast, especially if we can get any kind of MJO phase 2 influence. The cooler risk would be in here. But I think overall the milder signals are going to win out as a whole. Now, with that signal, with the milder signal, that's going to overall limit the frost potential, certainly compared to normal, as we work into the end of September and the start of October, because we're favoring a milder pattern. I would say below normal opportunities for frost threats as we get into the start of October for the ag belt. Now, naturally, as you get into mid-October, even with warmer than normal conditions, that threat will increase with any kind of a front that we get. We're just getting to that time of the year. But I would say that through the end of September and the start of October, really not major frost threats, certainly not freeze threats across the ag belt. And in terms of precipitation, what this all means is probably going to get back into the drier pattern. I do think that there can be some rounds of moisture opportunities across parts of the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes through here. Not bone dry. I do think that drier than normal conditions, though, in those areas where drought has been expanding, probably going to persist as we go throughout this time frame. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.